Well, in the book, I give examples of intellectuals' attempt, often a very successful attempt, to ignore the obvious and to reveal hidden characteristics and connections, and thereby to attain a new wisdom. And one of the examples I quote is that of Virginia Woolf, her failure to detect a pretty fundamental difference between the atmosphere, moral atmosphere of Britain and Nazi Germany in 1938, despite the fact that she had just visited Nazi Germany with her Jewish husband. At every point in her book, she drew parallels between the two countries, affecting to find no worthwhile difference between the two, and in the process treating her own personal grievances and dissatisfactions with life as of the same moral dimension as the political and racial persecutions in Germany. Well, it so happens, and I mentioned this in my essay, that my mother arrived in Britain from Nazi Germany as a refugee in 1938. And as a comparatively uneducated adolescent, she had no difficulty whatever in distinguishing Britain from Germany. In fact, education of a certain kind can actually impede rather than enhance understanding of the world. And it's not to be thought that all education is good and leads either to enlightenment or realism. And this has been so for a very long time. I'll give you an example. Shakespeare and his son-in-law, John Hall. John Hall was a doctor educated in Cambridge and possibly at Montpellier, and it is sometimes said that Shakespeare derived his knowledge of medical matters from him. There is, of course, a long history of denying that Shakespeare, that is to say, the person born in Stratford in 1564, could really have been Shakespeare, that is to say, the author of the plays, because Shakespeare in the first sense was insufficiently educated to be Shakespeare in the second sense. He, Shakespeare in the second sense... like Tony Daniels and Theodore Dalrymple. That's not a claim I would make for myself. Knew so much about law, medicine, philosophy, seamanship, and many other things that he couldn't have been just the boy from Stratford, but really he must have been Francis Bacon, or the Earl of Oxford, or the Earl of Rutland, or even Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson. And people who adhere to one of these real authors of Shakespeare contemptuously call those who think that Shakespeare number one was also Shakespeare number two, they call them Stratfordians. Well, with regard to medicine, especially in the matter of clinical observation, it is very instructive, actually, to compare Shakespeare with Dr. Hall. Let me first quote from the scene in Henry V where Mistress Quickly describes the death of Falstaff, a description of such power, actually, that many people think that Falstaff actually appears in the play. This is Mistress Quickly. "I made a finer end and went away, and it had been any Christom child, aparted even just between 12 and 1, even at the turning of the tide. For after I saw him fumble with the sheets and play with flowers and smile upon his finger's end, I knew that there was but one way. For his nose was as sharp as a pen, and it babbled of green fields. How now, Sir John, quoth I, what man, be of good cheer? So cried out, God, 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 3 or 4 times. Now I, to comfort him, bid him I should not think of God. I hoped there was no need to trouble him with any such thoughts yet. So I bade me lay more clothes upon his feet. I put my hand into the bed and felt them, and they were as cold as any stone. Then I felt to his knees, and so upward, and all was as cold as any stone." Well, the accuracy of the observation here, the medical observation, quite apart from the deeply moving humanity of it, is astonishing. And fumbling with the sheets and playing with flowers or whatever else comes to hand, that's how a person in an organic confusional state, such as Falstaff was suffering from, actually behaves, and these are still used as diagnostic signs. Nose as sharp as a pen, which is again exactly right. part of the Hippocratic facies that presages death. And the disjointed speech is also absolutely right. Now, let me... Yeah. No, I'll just repeat a little bit. Nose as sharp as a pen, which is again exactly right, part of the Hippocratic facies that presages death. And the disjointed speech is also absolutely right. Let us now turn to Dr. Hall. It so happens that he, Shakespeare's son-in-law, had a book published posthumously entitled Select Observations on English Bodies of Eminent Persons in Desperate Diseases, that went through 3 editions in the 17th century. And I quote at random, really. I just opened the book, and I will give you an impression of John Hall's mind and observation. Mr. Kempson, aged 60, oppressed with melancholy and a fever, with extraordinary heat, very sleepy, so that he had no sense of his sickness, was cured as followeth. Leaves of mallows, beets, violets, mercury, hops, borage, epithymium, pennyroyal, rue, wormwood, camomile, seeds of anise, rue, caraway, cummin, fennel, nettles, bayberries, polypod, senna, bark of black hellebore, and boil them all in whey till half be wasted. Of this strain, take an ounce. Confect, I don't know what that is, diaphanae, salt. Mix them and make a clyster, that's an enema. This brought away 2 stools with a great deal of wind. It was given in the morning and again at night, and after these were applied to the soles of his feet, radishes sliced, besprinkled with vinegar and salt, renewed every 3rd hour. This hindered the recourse of vapours and drew them back, and so he slept far more quietly, without starting and fear. The following was prepared for his ordinary drink: spring water, syrup of lemons, julep of roses, hartshorn burnt and powdered finely, spirit of vitriol. After, the leeches being applied to the anus, there was drawn 1 ounce of blood. 8 ounces of blood. After which was exhibited this: lapis bezoar, tincture of coral, mix them. It was given in posset drink. After this, the urine was very frothy, with a great sediment, and he was much better. The clyster, drink, and powder were repeated with desired event. To remove sleepiness, he used to sneeze only with tobacco. And then he was given the restorative of quercetinus, and that was used. But yet his stomach being very ill, I gave him this: emetic infusion, syrup of violets, oxymel of squills. This gave 4 vomits and 9 stools, after which he was well for 5 days, and then relapsing into a shaking ague, a clyster being injected, he became well, bidding farewell to physic, and so was cured beyond all expectation and lived many years. Well, I mean, of course, doctors still use the principle that if the treatment is unpleasant enough, people will get better. But I think the difference between the standard of observation in that page and the passage from Henry V is evident.